Hey guys, it's Nick and Jaden here from the Ice Hockey Aussies. Today we're here to talk to you guys about the blockbuster, basically wild card race between the East and the West. There's wild card races coming right down to the wire in both conferences. So with only about a week or so left in the home and away season, we thought we'd just do a bit of a video breakdown what's still to come and what teams and what it looks like heading into this sort of last, what is it, 4 or 5 games for each team and lasts probably 9 days of the regular season. Um, Basically in the East, you've got Florida Panthers, the New York Islanders, Pittsburgh Penguins, and Buffalo still in that hunt. I believe Ottawa Senators are still mathematically possible, but we didn't really include them because it'd take an absolute miracle from their behalf and an absolute capitulation from the other four teams. And then from the Western Conference, you've got Winnipeg, Calgary, and Nashville. They're fighting for one wild card spot. And I'm pretty sure everyone else is mathematically eliminated from that conference. So it's definitely only those three with any chance. But yeah, to get us kicked off, starting with probably Florida's run, you've got Jaden.
Alrighty. I guess I'll just explain. On the left side, we've just got the standings, as you can see, and also the schedule. And on the right side, we've got the teams and their records with the teams they're going to face in the schedule. So at the top of it, it is their record, and then below that is the score line that was in the games. Just thought I'd clarify that because there is a few numbers around on the spreadsheet. But yeah, starting off with Florida, probably the hottest team right now in the East in regards to this wild card race with a 6-4 in the last 10, won the last four. They have a semi difficult run versus Ottawa and Washington. They've had the trump over Washington, and then they got the harder run at the end with Toronto and Carolina. And the thing with that one is, like, I don't know if Toronto or Carolina start benching players to, relax. I don't. They could definitely do that, and they could be easier wins than it would have been earlier in the season. So they could be scoring some few points. I'm not too sure if you agree with that, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to know, right? Like Toronto know who they're playing. They know they're playing Tampa. They know they're probably going to be getting home ice advantage. It doesn't look like Tampa's going to really catch them on that either. And then Carolina is probably in a similar position by that final game, which I think is on basically the second to last day, April 13th. So, yeah, like it's tough. If Carolina have to win to maintain that first spot because, New Jersey or New York Rangers have, caught them somehow, then all of a sudden it becomes a trouble game for Florida if they're still fighting for a wild card spot. But if Carolina have wrapped up that number one spot, yeah, it does. It raises questions like, are Carolina going to go all out in the final game of the season right before playoffs, knowing they don't have anything to play for? So it probably plays in Florida's hands a bit here because yeah, they are on a streak, turn hot at the right time of the year. And they're probably one of the best placed teams in the East to sort of take a playoff spot at this point, even though their run home is a bit more difficult than some of the others.
yeah, you're
Um,
not wrong there. I guess we can move on to your little Islanders. I guess you can
yeah,
start talking about that one.
so the second team currently sitting in a wild card spot as well, the New York Islanders. They come up against Tampa Bay. That's Whew. I mean, they have not had a good time against Tampa yet at all. So they start off rough, but they finish pretty easy, coming up against Philadelphia, who don't overly have a lot to play for. Washington Capitals, who have obviously been mathematically kicked out of the playoffs now, and Montreal Canadiens. So they kind of start with a rough game and then finish pretty easy. So it's one of those things where given the Islanders are in a playoff spot now, and their draw, you look at it and think you probably got to win at least 3 out of those 4 minimum. And they've got it. Like their fate's in their own hands. I feel at this point, if they can get something out of Tampa tomorrow, then not to mention Tampa's on a back-to-back tomorrow as well. Um, yeah, like there's no reason they shouldn't finish in a playoff spot at this point.
No, they should definitely finish in a playoff spot, especially with kind of the ending. It is interesting that the records they have against Washington and Montreal. It's interesting that two of the games against Washington have gone to overtime or shootout, and the one time they didn't do that, they got obliterated. So it's a little bit worrying on that front. Uh, Montreal, it's a little bit worrying on that front because both games were close as well. And Philly have been hot. I say hot, but like hot compared to what they have been um, at this end part of the season. So it does look like an easy run, but these teams, though they don't have much to play for, they can definitely play spoil. Uh, and that's what worries me about New York Islanders. Other than that, I feel like they should definitely make it. I think they probably need 5 points out of these four games to make it. Not mathematically, obviously, but I feel like that would be somewhat alright. Though we got another team that we'll probably talk about next that could definitely take that from them, considering they're just only 1 point behind in the Penguins. So you definitely probably need to win 3 to make sure. 5 is
Three,
probably
three,
a rough risk.
three pretty much secures it, you would think.
Mm,
Unless of course the Pens go on an absolute tear. Um, but yeah, I think you're probably on the money there. If they can get 5 points out of this last 8, they probably secure that position. But yeah, the Pens will definitely be looking to hunt them down,
yeah,
that's for sure.
yeah. I think north of 91 is probably where you're looking for the East.
Hmm.
All right, I guess we can move on to the Penguins, another team that has 4 games left. Uh, Opposite kind of to the other two that we talked about, and that they're kind of on a decline. And it's kind of worrying if you've watched some of the latest games. It's definitely not the Penguins that you've come to know and love over the last few years. They're 4-6 in the last 10. They had a horrible game against New Jersey, and the team that's probably should be playing playoff hockey did not show up at all, and they haven't really showed up on a couple games in the last 10. I'm I don't know. I've lost my hope in regards to Penguins personally, just from watching them against the New Jersey Devils. It just didn't look like a team that was fighting for playoffs. And the only thing that's saving grace is they've got an easy run going in. They got Minnesota, a team that they've beaten in the one outing they've had. Then they got Detroit, Chicago, and Jackets. All teams probably like 25th and lower on the power rankings and the standings. The only problem being that Detroit's had their number in a sense, and but they have had Blue Jackets' number, so they could easily get 6, even 8 points, considering they've beaten Minnesota. But Detroit's probably the big question there if they can get that one done.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's an interesting one, right? Like you look at this and go, oh, Pittsburgh's run home compared to Florida and even the Islanders in a sense, even though Islanders isn't terribly hard. But you look at the Penguins and go, okay, well, Jackets, Chicago, Detroit, they should win that. There's no questions. They should win those games easily. And Minnesota, they should be able to take it to them, as you said. I think they play Minnesota at home as well. So that's even there. But just the way they've been playing, if you looked at this and didn't, and there was no recent history, you just looked at this and went, okay, cool. You don't know how the Pens have been playing lately. You would probably say the Penguins will finish in a playoff spot. But given their form, I can't I can't see them. I can't see them winning 3 out of 4. I see them dropping a game that they shouldn't. I could honestly, I could see them beating Minnesota and Detroit and then losing to Chicago and Blue Jackets
Yeah, no,
because
I,
that's
I
the
agree.
team they've been. Like
Mm,
it's insane how poor they've been of late, and they've just dropped points they shouldn't. So yeah, I mean, you look at it and to be honest, they should probably get it done and be able to over Florida, at least one of them, given the difficulty of Florida's run home. But yeah, given form, man, I don't see them doing it at this point. I think their 16-year
Mm.
playoff run is going to come to an end.
Yeah, personally, from watching the games, I think they're lacking defensively center ice. So I feel like teams move up too easily through the middle of the ice into their zone and out of their own
Hmm.
zone. I feel like it's just from watching it's a bit too easy. I would just also like to note
Yeah.
in regards to schedules, Florida only have one away game, and that's against Capitals. Islanders only have one away game, and that's against the Capitals. Pittsburgh have two, so 50% of the games, and Buffalo, that we're about to speak, has four away out of six. So out of all those, Buffalo looks like it has the hardest, and I guess we can move on to Buffalo Sabres with you.
Yeah. So these guys are probably the wild card. Like they're sitting 5 points back of Pittsburgh at the moment, 6 points out of a playoff spot. But they do have those two games in hand as well. So, it's one of those things. They win those two games, they're only 2 points back. The issue I'm seeing with it is given you're expecting, as you said before, probably 91 points will get it done. They'd need to win minimum five, and even that's a big ask. Like I think they could win five and still miss out realistically.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
five and an OT.
yeah, exactly, right? 11 points, you might be lucky. Um, but they've got a mixed bag as well because they don't have an easy run by any means. They've got Detroit, which they've had Detroit's number this year so far, which is good. But then they come up against Carolina, and we're talking a Carolina team that is still trying to secure that first spot. So it's not like they're playing a Carolina with nothing to play. They're playing a Carolina who's most likely going to be hunting for like to secure that first spot in the Metro. Then they come up against the New York Rangers. Two games so far, both of them have gone to OT, so tight games. Again, same scenario. Rangers are trying to catch the Devils to get home ice advantage in that first series and potentially catch Carolina if they can pull that off. I doubt it will happen, but the potential is there. So that's not an easy game either. And then they come up against New Jersey, who again is going to be fighting for the home ice advantage against the New York Rangers, or potentially taking that number one spot off of Carolina in the Metro. So just in those first four games, yeah, they're playing the first Detroit, who they've got their number. The next three games is three of the toughest teams in the Metro, all with things still to play for. So that's what really concerns me about Buffalo's run home, given they need to win minimum five games. Um, and then they finish up with Ottawa, who, Ottawa sort of had their number. They lost those two games to them when, their playoff sort of run was on the line. And then they finish up with the Columbus Blue Jackets. One thing I'll say is if they get to that final game against Columbus and it's win and playoffs, there's probably not a better team to play.
Hmm.
Um, but the biggest concern is 100% getting through those three of those first four games in Carolina, New York, and New Jersey. It's just they need to win all three of them, and at worst they can lose one, and that's still putting them at risk of not making playoffs. So yeah, I just personally, I'd love to see Buffalo make the playoff spot. That would be amazing. I think it'd just be a great fairy tale finish to a team that's played interesting hockey, but some really exciting, fun hockey
Mm.
this season. I personally can't see it happening, unfortunately.
The thing that deters me away from Buffalo making it is the fact out of the six games, two of them are back to backs. They got New Jersey on a back to back from the Rangers, and then they got Blue Jackets on a back to back from Ottawa. And that's a little bit of a trip from Ottawa to Columbus. There's basically zero trip from Rangers to Devils, but that's my other thing is even though they got a harder schedule, they've also got back to backs in it where the other teams don't.
Hmm.
And so that what really deters me from Buffalo doing it. It's going to be a hella run if they did. I feel like to make it safe, they have to win all six. Um,
Yeah.
like even five doesn't make it, so yeah, it would have to be a hell of a run. Uh,
Yeah.
and the other
Yeah.
thing I would just like to say as well, like even though they got the back to backs, there's actually not much travel. They've got like they're facing four metro teams, so and they're all pretty located. Ottawa's only just across the border, and Detroit's just like a state or two away. So there's not much travel in there. So hopefully that does bode well for them. I guess we can move on to the West now, though, with the Winnipeg Jets, team that's definitely been on a slide. Definitely not where they were in the start and middle of the season. It's a little heartbreaking in some senses. They got four games. They got Nashville, San Jose, Minnesota, and Colorado. In regards to that, the Colorado game is on a back-to-back from the Minnesota game, which is a little bit tough for them. They've kind of not really had Nashville's number. They've won 2 out of 3, but two of those games have gone to OT, and those are the games they won. And San Jose, they have not beat San Jose. That's a shock and horror. They have not beat Minnesota. Haven't even taken a point from them. They've only scored 4 goals in 3 games and conceded 14. So I don't have faith in that game. And then they've somehow beaten Colorado 2 times and lost once. One of them was in OT. They did 5-0 them. I'm not too sure when they beat them though, because this might have been before
They
Colorado
beat them in
became.
their Yeah, they beat them in the rough time. Like
Yeah,
we're talking October and November.
that's
These
that's
two
what I
wins
thought might have
came.
happened. Yeah, so I don't
Yeah,
have faith too much in that. So honestly, you're looking at possibly 4 points like that they could scrape away from these games. Just with the way they're playing as well. I don't really have much faith for scoring more points, honestly, because they haven't been playing playoff hockey. It's good to see Kyle Connor um, scoring now because he went on a big drought and whatnot. But yeah, it's a bit rough. They are still 1 game in hand over Calgary and on the same points. And if it ever came to the same points, they have a better regular overtime wins with 42. And the next highest is 35. So they've got that in hand if they end on the same points.
yeah, and yeah, like that's yeah. Neither team is catching them on that, so they've 100% got that up their sleeve. Um, but one of the big, I guess I don't know, like stuff used to Winnipeg's is if you look at the if you look at the finish, they finish playing Minnesota and Colorado on a back-to-back. Cool. So does Nashville. But Nashville play Minnesota the day after Winnipeg. So Minnesota's on a back-to-back. And then they play Colorado on a back-to-back after just playing Winnipeg. So Winnipeg's got to play both of those teams in the first game of like it's their first game for Minnesota and first game for Colorado in both of
Mm.
their back to back. But Nashville get both of them in game two. So it's almost like, okay, Winnipeg, cool. You got a fresh Minnesota and a fresh Colorado. They beat the crap out of you beat the crap out of them, and then they go and play Nashville to finish up and potentially cost you a playoff spot. So it's a funny way the schedule can really screw you over sometimes. Um, but yeah, I am concerned for the Jets. They're geared up in a sense that, right now they're equal on points with Calgary. They've got a game in hand. It's in their hands. Like they can't if they finish on the same points, they're gonna make the playoffs. And they've got Nashville and San Jose. I don't know how Nashville is still in this race, but those two teams there, they should almost take them. And if they do, that essentially means Calgary needs 6 points to beat Winnipeg, or 5 points to beat Winnipeg. Like those two wins all of a sudden mean Minnesota and Colorado become less important. But I just don't know if they can do it. I honestly, at this point, like the way they've been playing, it wouldn't surprise me if they lost to both of Nashville and San Jose.
Yeah,
So yeah, like they're definitely not my favorites to make the playoffs at this point.
yeah. No, I agree. The only thing saving grace for me is just they've got Hellebuck, and that's they've got the goalie out of the other two teams, in my opinion. And
True,
that's
you're
the
not
only
wrong.
saving grace I have for them. And we know goalies can steal games, and then once they get to playoffs, can carry playoffs. We've seen it before with Quick and whatnot. So yeah, but I guess we can move on to the Flames now with you.
Yeah, so this is my team to make the playoffs. I think they're geared up. Their recent form, they've taken 13 points from their last 10 games, 6-3-1 record, and they're coming home to Canucks, Nashville, San Jose. I know Canucks have been a lot better as of late, so that's probably one of the concerns. But, if you're talking about any of these teams, all of these teams are playing at least one playoff team, right? At minimum, one playoff team. They don't have any. They're not coming up against a single team that's in the playoffs right now. Nashville is the toughest opponent of the lot, or the closest to a playoff spot. So,
Yeah, I would say
yeah,
Vancouver's no pushover at the moment.
no, no, no. Like, and that's what I mean. Like, I know Vancouver's been on a run, but my point being is they're not playing playoff teams at this point. So if you were gonna take anyone's run home, you're probably taking Calgary's at this point. Um, but yeah, so they've had Canucks number this year as well, 2-0-1. They've had San Jose's number this year, 3-0-0. Nashville have had their number, but they are coming up against Nashville at home, so they do have that home ice advantage. Um, that could play a part in it. So for me at the moment, I could see these guys walking away with 5 points, and all of a sudden that puts a lot of pressure on a team like Winnipeg to at least get a point from Minnesota or Colorado, and to win those first two games. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think Calgary for me at the moment, um,
Hmm.
I actually think, yeah, I think they'll get it done.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that they're the only team in this out of these three that doesn't have a back-to-back to play. I would say that it's not really in their hands because of just how less of games they have compared to Jets and Nashville. I
Yeah.
feel like it's really in Nashville's hands and what they do because they verse both the Jets and Flames. And so if they
Hmm.
turn it on and take points from them, then it throws everything in the woodworks. But if they get points from Nashville, then yeah, I would still say Jets are my favorite, just because they got an extra game in hand, and they have the ROW. So and Nashville have had Flames' number. Doesn't mean they will have it in the next game, but they have. So I'm more convinced that Nashville win that game, meaning Flames at most get 4 points, and it shouldn't be too hard for Jets, to get 4 points out of 4 games. They've pretty much been
Yeah.
500 for a long time now. um, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
that's my opinion on it.
Um,
Though obviously taking the team less performing out of the two, that's for sure. um,
yeah, but they are, and I guess that's what they did, right? 43 wins. You look at the teams we're talking about right now, they've got three more wins than any other team that we're
hmm
talking about at the moment.
And yet they're
So,
not
you
the
know,
best team at the moment. It's a funny situation.
it is, right? Um, so
And
yeah, it's
yeah,
in Jets' hands, but Calgary are probably the the team to beat at the moment.
yep. Moving on to Nashville then, a team with also a back-to-back, like you mentioned. They start off with Carolina. The only outing they've had against them they beat, and that was away. Then they go on the important game against the Jets. then the other important game against the Flames, and then Minnesota and Colorado. And Colorado on the back-to-back. They have had the Flames number, like we've said. Jets game, they only game that they've won was in regulation. The other two games went to OT that they lost in OT, which bodes well that at least they're probably going to take a point from it. And the Minnesota game, they are 50-50. Only Colorado's had their number out of these ones. And I can't see them really beating Colorado, which is how hot they are right now, especially on a back-to-back. But Colorado also on a back-to-back. So take what you can. It's going to be the hardest run. They got 86 points. They got 5 games left. They honestly, I could see them doing it with how they've been playing. They have been kind of 500 or slightly above 500. So I feel like they're playing better than Winnipeg. I'd probably say Calgary's probably playing equal or maybe a little bit better than Nashville. So it'd probably be Calgary, Nashville Jets in regards to how they're playing. But I feel like they could do it. It's very surprising for just they were sellers. They got a net negative 11 goal differential, but they just turned it on at the weirdest time, and they've been playing really good hockey. It's actually enjoyable to watch, and I think they could do it. They do still have some holes, obviously, because they were sellers, and even if they made it, I don't feel like they would do anything. Same with the Jets, honestly. I feel like if the Jets make it, unless Hellebuck does something, I don't feel like they do anything. And the only team that does anything in the playoffs would be Calgary.
Yeah, I think, basically whoever if Winnipeg makes it, I mean they're coming up against Vegas, so I guess, that question mark there. Um, whichever one of these teams wins, they're coming up against. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't just say they're coming up against Vegas. They're coming up against Vegas or most like Vegas or Edmonton at this point. It looks like. Um, so yeah, I mean it's tough, but at the same time you're coming up against the best in the Pacific rather than the best in the Central, which probably helps a little bit. The issue I got with Nashville is playing those three tough. Oh, yeah. You got Carolina, who are still trying to secure first in the Metro. You got Minnesota and Colorado, who are both not just fighting for first in the Central, but also, if they can't get first, fighting for home ice advantage against Dallas or, or Minnesota or Colorado, whoever they end up playing. Um, so yeah, like they're coming up against 5 teams in this last 5 games with something to play for. Um, but I tell you what, if they get the win against Carolina tomorrow, I think they play. Um, oh my God, how good would that be? That would set up just a phenomenal next 2 games. If Nashville get the win against Carolina, the game against the Jets and the game against the Flames, it just becomes so important because it's just like, well, now you flip the script. It is literally in your hands. You beat the Jets, and you're the favorite to make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah.
But
I would say
yeah,
because just how the schedule is also, I feel like up to April 10th we'll probably know who's going to be in the playoffs just because for the East and West, 5 out of 7 are played tomorrow. All of them play on the 8th, and then all but Pittsburgh play on the 10th. So
yeah,
I feel like after the 10th we should have a good idea on who's going to be making the playoffs and whatnot. Just because in those games, Nashville versus uh, both teams, they and some of the teams in the East have the easier or harder side of their schedule in regards to the harder side. So Islanders and Florida have their or Islanders really only have the harder side, and Florida has the harder side at the end. So I feel like we'll know by the end of the 10th. That's my prediction. You won't know mathematically, but you'll probably have a really, really good idea. But
yeah,
my favorites obviously Florida and New York Islanders in the East. Just because of how Pittsburgh's played. It's hard to write them off though, just because you've got the Crosby and Malkin and whatnot factors. And on the Western side, I'm favoring Winnipeg just purely because of the ROW, because even if and the extra game, because even if it ends in equal points, then they get that upper hand. Though I think Calgary at the moment's playing better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in the East. As much as I'd love Buffalo to make it, as I mentioned before, um, and for Crosby, I'm a big fan of Crosby. I'd love to see Crosby in the playoffs again, but and you're right, they could do it, but at this point in time, given recent form, you'd have to say Florida and New York are gonna wrap those last two playoff spots up probably by the 10th, maybe even the 8th, given depending on results. And as for the West, I know that the Jets are favorites at the moment, and understandably so. The game in hand and the ROW. But I don't know. I've just got this feeling. I've got this feeling the Jets are they're gonna fall over, and the Flames are gonna just they're gonna get it done. I don't know what it is. I don't know why.
It
I just
might be
feel like the Flames.
not recency bias, but past bias, because Jets have just seemed to do that in the past as well. So it's
Yeah,
probably that
yeah,
little factor in regards to it as well. It will be interesting
probably.
if
Yeah,
Winnipeg do make it. All the teams with the better, basically the better goal differential, will be making it. With Florida, New York Islanders with +13, and then Winnipeg has +8 more than Calgary's in regards to goal differential. So if those three
yeah.
teams make it, basically it's just whoever had the better goal differential made it.
Mm. Yeah, and that's probably you're probably looking at, other than Florida as well. One of the things is two of the best teams at defensive wise in terms of goals conceded in New York Islanders with 214, and the Winnipeg Jets with 218 compared to all the other teams. Because I think people forget sometimes offense is good, but defense is also important. If you can keep the puck out of your net, it means the less goals you need to score to win.
Yeah,
So
that's why I like the
um
Islanders. They've always had that nitty gritty style on the boards and whatnot, keeping it out of the slot type of situation. And I feel like with Winnipeg, they kind of have the similar, but it's more Hellebuck.
yeah,
Even the
yeah,
Islanders who have a good goalie as well.
yeah. I think the Islanders have defense and a good goalie. I think with Winnipeg, it's their goaltender. For sure. But nah, look, I definitely think, yeah, Florida and Islanders in the East. I think the Winnipeg Jets are obviously favorites, but I have a feeling the Flames are going to get it done, and they're my pick to have it happen. I would love to see Buffalo and Nashville make it, just purely for the fact that it's an absolute fairy tale for both of them. Buffalo, just out of nowhere, not really expected to make it, and they would. And Nashville, sellers at the trade deadline, make playoffs. It would just be, it'd just be one of those headlines like, how the hell did they pull that off? Sold at the deadline and still somehow pulled it off and made
Mm.
playoffs.
And new GM,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I don't think it'll happen. I really don't. I can't see it happening for either of them. But tomorrow will tell, right? Like if Nashville can play against Carolina and play well, I might change my tune and be like, well, fuck, Nashville, definitely a good chance now.
Mm.
But as it stands, yeah, I can't see Buffalo or Nashville doing it, but I would love to see it just for the headlines.
I guess the one last thing we can touch on is just what teams will play spoiler. Looks like Carolina may play spoiler. They verse Florida, was it Buffalo, Nashville, like we said. So they could play spoiler. Nashville could play their own spoiler versus the Jets and Flames each. It looks like
Yeah.
Colorado and Minnesota can play spoiler in the West. In regards to the East, it looks like Washington could with Florida and Islanders, and they could play
Mhm.
spoiler for them. And I think there's a couple others, but I'm not seeing them at the moment. Um,
You
But yeah,
get Blue Jackets and Ottawa play a couple of
yeah,
games,
Ottawa
but
as well. Yep. But yeah, those are the teams that are probably looking to play spoiler. There's only out of those ones I've mentioned, there's probably only Minnesota and Colorado are on the playoff end of things. So that bodes well for the teams that are trying, and not so much for Nashville and the Jets.
yeah,
Alrighty.
exactly.
Well, I guess we can end it there. So yeah, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more content. We do weekly power rankings as well, and leave a comment below on who you think makes it, which team you support, and why you think they should or shouldn't make it. And yeah, and happy Easter. Have a safe Easter. Enjoy your holidays, and I guess until next power rankings or next video, we'll see you then.
Take care, guys.